about a minute to get started. So, okay, cool. Okay. So for those of you just joining in the feed, we'll get started in just about 30 seconds. To get started. Mute every device I own.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, that's on
Carrier
silence. That's on silence. That's on silence.
Exactly. You get a mute button. You get a mute button. All right. I think we're good. All right, everybody. Welcome to the Chariot TechCast Tuesday. I'm here with Becca Refford, and our guest today is Alex Hillman. He's the author of the Tiny MBA. How you doing, Alex?
I'm doing really good and glad to be here. How are you?
Great. Hiding.
Yes.
Hiding in the weather in someplace quiet in my house.
The storm is upon us, that's for sure.
Yes. Although I think it'll be over pretty soon. So thank you for joining us, and thank you for thinking of us for your book. And I reached out to you. You had podcasts of this, 8 years ago now, when you were rocking Indy Hall early on. And let's get a little thumbnail. So you've been doing Indy Hall, the co-working space, I know, and you're doing some training and consulting, I guess, with Stacking the Bricks. Tell us a little bit more about what you've been doing over the last, 8 years.
Okay, here we go. So over 8 years, Indy Hall, which is Philadelphia's first co-working space, one of the first in the city, first in the country, one of the first in the world. We started, kind of before co-working was this sort of global phenomenon. Still doing it. Doing it in a pandemic is weird.
Yeah.
And when you start a business with the goal of bringing people together, and then the one thing that you aren't supposed to do is bring people together, things get interesting. So Indy Hall has, for as long as we've been at it, and at this point we're hundreds of members, and wide-ranging industries. Remote work has become such a bigger thing even before the current environment, and more people, maybe moving to Philadelphia because a partner gets a job at one of the hospitals or universities, and their employer says, well, we'd love to keep you on, you can be remote. And the person says, well, that's great, but I don't want to work from home because I'm not good at working from home, or I just want to be around other people. And Indy Hall has continued to grow and thrive in a myriad of ways, including that one. In the last several months, obviously, things have been a little different. We made the call early on to close the space for obvious safety reasons, even before the governor sort of mandated things. But for as long as we've been a community, which is 14 years now, which is just unbelievable to me.
Wow.
For 14 years, online community has always been a part of what we do. We've always had online spaces as complements to our physical gathering place, whether it's our co-working space or getting together at places like National Mechanics in Old City, Philadelphia, which is like our favorite, bar and restaurant hangout, things like that. So the online community thing is something we've already been doing and are already pretty good at. The difference now is it's where we put 100% of our attention rather than, less than 100%. So, being in a position to have a running head start, but also remembering that the reason Indy Hall exists is to bring people together and have people find ways to help each other in times of need. There may have never been a bigger time of need than now, at least in our history.
Yeah.
And so it's been really exciting to watch the community continue to thrive in spite of, a lot of the challenges. And, people are definitely in some tough spots right now, but watching people step up and find ways to help each other is still really remarkable. And I feel confident that Indy Hall will exist on the other side of this, even if the format is different, because Indy Hall is the people, not the place. So
Right.
that's sort of the update on Indy Hall. Along the way, my friend Amy Hoy and I also started distilling our experiences, our perspective, and some of the sort of unique approaches and systems that we've taken to business. Amy has a background in software development and design. That's mine as well. Before I started Indy Hall, I was a web developer. So technology and design is sort of in our DNA and our those are the communities that we're a part of. I started Indy Hall. Amy started a software company with her husband, a time tracking tool called Noko, Noko. And we had all these friends who were, creative friends with the skills to make stuff and put it on the internet, which is like a really valuable skill set to have these days. Yeah. And we watched our friends, our really talented, creative friends, hop from startup job they hated to startup job they hated to corporate job they hated to startup job they hated, occasionally going out, raising a bunch of venture capital to start a company that they hated. And the pattern across all of this is people having this sort of really limited scope on what it means to have a job or even make a job for yourself, which is, I think, my favorite way of framing entrepreneurship is creating a job for yourself. So Amy and I sat down about 10 years ago and said, what are we seeing that our friends don't see? What do we know that our friends don't know? Not because we're smarter, but because we've taken this sort of alternative path into business. And how do we start sharing that? And through a website that's now called Stacking the Bricks and a whole sort of universe of videos and courses and products and articles and podcasts. Like, we've got a whole bunch of stuff free and paid on stackingthebricks.com. Over the last 10 years, we've been teaching creative people how to start product businesses of their own. So when I say product business, I'm not specific to any format of product. It could be SaaS software, could be a book, it could be a course, it could be a live workshop, though maybe not right now. In theory, could even be a physical product or something like that. Like, what we teach is not specific to a format. It's the fundamentals of who are you best suited to serve in your creating a business. How do you reach them? How do you find them and reach them? And then how do you build a set of systems and most importantly, an understanding of those people, the problems they have, and what they would buy. Not that you create a thing and then wonder who would buy it later. You know what I mean? Sort of the opposite of the kind of lean startup approach, which is like, come up with an idea and validate it. We say, screw ideas, go understand an audience really well and make the stuff they need. Not the things you think they need, the things they say they need, whether they say it explicitly or implicitly. So that Stacking the Bricks universe has also grown pretty incredibly over the last 10 years. Our flagship course, which kind of contains an end-to-end educational process. It's like the length of a semester-long course to go through the whole thing. We put about 500 to 600 students through that a year globally. And that's helping people create businesses all over the world, which has been really, really exciting. And the latest product in that sort of lineup is the opposite of that 6-month sort of master's course size of how to start and run a business. And it's this little guy that you can read in 30 minutes called the Tiny MBA.
Put that up again.
Sure.
Where are you here? Hold on a second.
Yep.
Ken learns how to use the tools. Oh, dear gosh. There it is. Thank you.
Cool. So Tiny MBA is this little, it's pocket sized. It's nice and thin. And the pages themselves are, to call this thing a book, it's a book because it feels like a book. But the way that this, well, I'll talk about the problem with a book, I would say, and why another business book. How many business books do you think you've read? Or I want to ask how many you've bought.
Yeah,
how many do you think you've read?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the point. So there's lots of great business books, and I've got a whole bunch that are among my favorites. But the challenge, of course, is there are zillions of them, and most of them are 200, 300, 400 pages, and they're going to take you at least a couple hours to get through, if they're good enough to keep you going all the way through them. But also, they all take sort of one of two formats. One is like the everything you need to know about a thing,
Yeah.
which is, I get where that comes from, and I there are some good examples of that. Actually, the Personal MBA, my cousin of a book, created by my friend Josh Kaufman, I think is a really good example of everything you need. Like, the thesis of the Personal MBA, not the Tiny MBA, is I read 99 business books so you don't have to. but John, that book is an outlier in terms of that being done well. The other kind of business book is the kind that could really be a blog post or two, but it's like 17 stories to give you one, maybe two really useful points, which is a lot of work on your part reading. I mean, stories are valuable. They're what helps cement things in our brain. Like, again, I don't want to knock that format. It's just what we see a lot of. The problem that I do see with that format is if I'm going to commit 3 to 4 hours or more to read a book, to get one idea that's really good out of it, which I think is a great investment in a book, by the way, the odds of then that idea being applicable in my work or my life immediately or very soon or what I need right now is really, really kind of low, even if I'm being strategic about reading books that sort of match what I'm trying to learn. So this book takes kind of a different approach than both of those. It's not everything you need to know, but it's also not sort of weighted down with tons of stories and narrative. Basically, there's 2 stories at the beginning. One by the woman who wrote the foreword, my friend Nilofer Merchant, who's this incredible woman. She's a former corporate executive, executive trainer, executive coach, a writer, an author. She's been on if you've seen the TED talk about walking meetings that went viral a couple of years ago, that was her. She tells a story, a very short story in the forward, and I tell a very short story in sort of a how to read this book intro. But the rest of it are these tiny little, they almost look like Post-it notes on every page that's got, a paragraph, a few sentences to a paragraph of an idea or a lesson or a thought or prompt. And they cover a wide range of topics, but my hope is that people can read through this book in 30 minutes, or they can read through this book in an hour or two the first time to kind of get a lay of the land, maybe take some notes. You see there's a lot of white space on the pages. The book's not how to do business. It's how to think like a business person. And specifically, the lessons in here, there's nothing in here that's like particularly brand new. There's a lot of this is stuff that you will read across 100 business books, but it's stuff that a lot of people don't really learn until they've been in business for 15 years. And it's stuff that I think that it's the stuff that comes out in the one-on-one conversations that I have with both brand new and aspiring entrepreneurs, but even people who are later in their business career who are, maybe a little bit too close to the problem and kind of forgot the point. I think is really easy to do. And so my point of the book is to kind of like bring you back and remind you like why you got into business in the first place and what it really means to start and run and grow a business for the long term.
Yeah, you kind of have I don't want to say this in a negative way, it's a positive way. It's the Zen Cone book of business. There's little kernels of wisdom, hard-won kernels of wisdom. I've gone through a lot of these things as an employee of a lot of smaller companies.
Yeah.
For example, like one that jumps out to me and screams to me is partners and customers. Like that whole duality, you kind of need to play with both to some degree, but one can definitely manipulate the situation with the other if you're not careful. If you go too deep into partnership, you might change the way your business works, and it may not necessarily be what your original goal was, but you're on a ride.
That's right.
So I mean, they were really great to go through. I spent a couple of hours going through this book and just nodding my head a lot, and then going, "Oh, yeah, I really should be doing this as opposed to that." So it definitely has value to me already, and it's the kind of book you keep on your desk and flip through periodically, I think, if you're trying to keep yourself in the right mind frame.
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I love the Zen Cones sort of comparison. Another reference. Are you familiar with The Oblique Strategies by Brian Eno?
No. Okay,
yeah. So Brian Eno is this incredible electronic musician and just a really interesting creative person. A lot of besides his music, he talks and writes a lot about the creative process. And he has what is effectively a deck of cards that have these prompts that are designed to help your brain get unstuck. And they're prompts like, how would your best friend do it? Which is like, what the heck does that mean? But it's meant to like kind of shake you out of complacency or rhythm or flow so that you can find a better one. And I think that's kind of the goal here. So to hear you say it, and you know, it's a reference book, but not in the way people think of necessarily as a reference book. It's the thing you flip to, you stick your finger on a random page, you read it, and you go, well, what does that mean to me today? Might be exactly the thing you needed to hear to make a valuable decision or a next step, whatever that might be.
So in your, you know, as I'm reading this book, I'm thinking like there are definitely habits that good, successful business builders have. Like for you, when you were getting started, what did you not know that you now practice on a regular basis as a person running businesses?
Ooh, that's a really good
I know it's a
question.
little open question, but
Well, I mean, so the first thing that comes to mind is, and this is a little bit counterintuitive, and I'm not even sure if it's said explicitly in the book, but it's definitely implied, is slowing down. A
mm,
lot of business, and I think business culture and business narrative is about speed, speed, speed. Get it faster, get it bigger. One of the lessons in the book, that is so much of a lesson that it's one of the pages that we also had illustrated, is bigger isn't better, better is better. And
yeah,
I could translate that to faster isn't better, better is better. You know, there are advantages to speed, no question, but I think there is a inherent reactiveness to a lot of business culture that I definitely felt early on. You know, you see an opportunity and you feel like every opportunity is an opportunity worth jumping on. And so you want to be the first one to jump on it, close that
right,
deal and figure out the rest later. Um, and when resources are scarce, that's extra true because you really need those resources, whether that's money to pay the rent, or if you're in a situation where you have employees to pay, help them pay their rent, you know.
yeah,
So, you know, the need to go fast sometimes is juxtaposed against responsibilities and reality. So it's complicated. Um, but one of the things that I've learned over and over is that the the fast answer can be the right answer. But if you slow down just enough to kind of evaluate the situation, even just a little bit more than the knee-jerk reaction, um, in the best case, in the worst case scenario, you find that all you did was waste a couple of minutes. And I'm not talking about like wait a week. I'm talking about wait 30 minutes or an hour instead of sending that email back in 30 seconds, right?
yeah, right.
That little bit of pause can be the thing that allows you to explore what I call a hidden option C, right? A lot of times the knee-jerk reaction is to, well, it's between this or that. And even when one of those is clearly a good option, when you sort of zoom out, you know, a lot of times you're like, well, maybe there's still an even better option than the two or whatever were presented. And those hidden option C options, in my experience, are also where the most value can be created. And I'm going to say created specifically rather than extracted. Um, Hidden option C options tend to be the ones where everyone involved gets the most rather than one person getting measurably more than the other person. And the reason I think that's so important, and this also comes back to speed and time, is because when you're all focused on the deal that's right in front of you, the opportunity that's right in front of you, the goal that's right in front of you, it's really easy to miss what comes next or what comes 3 or 4 chess moves down the road. So when I'm looking for a hidden option C, for me, the best hidden option C is the one that gets everything done and makes everyone happy now and sets up a future success. If the thing I'm doing now is not also creating a better opportunity for me in the future, or deepening the relationship with a prospect or a partner, or even if I don't know exactly what that turns into, that type of long-term multi-step thinking is really where um, the I think the long-term view of slowing down, even just briefly, starts to kick in.
Okay, so I actually want to talk about the book from a design standpoint because the content was awesome, but I also just like the look and feel of it. You mentioned that one really big graphical quote. So you broke up these sort of smaller truisms with these like beautiful typography pages. So I read on the Technically write-up that you teamed up with Hannah Litvin to do that work for you. So can you talk a little bit about that partnership there and like how that came to be?
I would love to, and I'm thrilled to get a chance to plug Hannah. This book would not exist without her work, like point blank. I met Hannah. Actually, we've known each other on Twitter for many years now, but only recently, as recently as in the last 12 months, met in person, and we collaborated on a project at the end of last year, beginning of this year, that was a zine. We did a zine called Career Control that Hannah went out and interviewed a bunch of folks from the region who have created sort of alternative career paths for themselves. Some of them are, entrepreneurial, but not necessarily in fields that you would think of as entrepreneurial. Some of them are just people who have just gone a different way than you're used to hearing about. That was the goal, is to show people that there's more than one way to create a job for yourself, as I said before. So Hannah did those interviews, but she also designed the zine herself, and she taught herself Illustrator in order to design the zine. I'm sorry, Illustrator, InDesign.
Okay, still awesome.
And absolutely incredible, and it came out so good. And I was impressed with her from top to bottom. And so when I started thinking seriously about turning the sort of core of this book into a book, I reached out and I was like, I've got this idea, but sort of the packaging and presentation needs something, and I don't know what. But I feel like you would do something really cool with this. So she said yes. I was thrilled to. And one of the first things that she pitched was taking some of the lessons and turning them into that sort of stylized typography for in the book, but also for like stickers and postcards. And so like I'm imagining ones like "the bigger isn't better, better is better" as a sticker that you can put on your laptop or your notebook or something like that, which I think would be really, really dope. So the visual concepts, 100% her. The other story I can tell about working with Hannah, which was just this really wonderful collaborative process, which you don't always get. It was a lot of like really awesome, respectful back and forth, and she'd pitch ideas and help me sort of communicate not just what I liked, but why I liked it, and think like it was a lot of really, really awesome co-creation. The cover, which we did kind of last. She messaged me and she goes, what book covers do you want? Like, what book covers do you like? Like, we got to pick a starting point. So obviously, like, what's your Pinterest board of your favorite business books? And I went through most of my favorite business books have not been written in the last 20 years. So I sort of went back to the classics, the Dale Carnegie, the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, things like that. It's the classics, and they all look kind of the same. They also look super dated. And what I said to her was, I would love to look like one of these books, but also kind of a parody of these books, because the book is kind of it's not a parody in that it's meant to be funny, but it's a genre parody of business books in a way. And so the cover can do that too. So how do we take like the How to Win Friends and Influence People book cover and make it clearly a throwback, but also have some fun with it? And I thought to myself, this is the worst creative direction you could possibly give. And she came back with this cover that is just so freaking cool. And like, I say cool, but I think it's genuinely whatever, like what the textbook definition of cool is. And like one of my, apart from like the topography, which I just think is just really, really rad, up in the top corner here, the in the Tiny MBA is a it's like a sticker from a used bookstore.
Yeah.
And it's one of those little things that, especially on the physical book, makes me smile. We've gotten so many compliments on the typography choices and the design choices in the book. 100% of that credit goes to Hannah. She knocked it out of the park, and is for hire. So if you were publishing, want to do print stuff, hit her up. She's fantastic and wonderful to work with.
That's awesome. I love that little touch of the sticker in the corner.
And actually, I didn't see this, but and because you can barely see it in the print version. But on the digital version, somebody that was doing an advanced release read sent me a screenshot. Hannah snuck a little Easter egg in here that I didn't even see until somebody else pointed out. If you zoom in on the in this little red stripe, and it says 30x500 value. And 30 by 500, 30x500 is the name of the flagship course that Amy and I teach.
Oh, that's awesome.
Which I was like, very, very clever. And it's a tiny little touch. And I was like, you snuck an Easter egg past me. It just totally made my day.
That's awesome.
That is great. Speaking of promotion, so I'm glad you promoted Hannah, and it sounds like she's super talented to work with. You have a nice little quote in the book, like, people avoid self-promotion too much, or are afraid to self-promote. Like, what do you see as like their biggest sticking point for that? Is it fear of the unknown, or?
I think there's two parts to it. I think there's a few parts to it. I think people want to brag, is the truth. I think they feel a certain way about what will happen if they do. Right? And so there's two things. One is, I think this is the most common, is people fear putting themselves out there, because as soon as you do, you open yourself up to everything, the good stuff and the bad stuff, which includes being told you're being self-promotional. And that doesn't feel good. And it also depends on the audience and who you're doing it in front of. And one of the things I always remind folks is consider who you're promoting to, right? Are they people who already want to hear from you? People who have already seen your work? They've already found some way to notice and appreciate and want more. When that's happening, it's not self-promotion. I mean, it is self-promotion, but it is, if you flip it around, it's telling something to somebody who already wants to hear it. And so always considering the audience, I think, is one of it's a theme through a lot of the book. It's a theme through a lot of our work. And I think it's one of the fundamentals that people really, really get stuck on. If you are thinking about the audience in your self-promotion, how do you give them something? Even if it's not, without asking for something in return, it gives you the opportunity to, down the road, ask. Not demand, but ask, offer, things like that. Yeah. The second thing is, I think a lot of people associate the word and the experience of self-promotion with things they've seen other people do. And those other people very often are not good at self-promotion. So people associate the worst behavior on the spectrum with the whole spectrum. So again, for instance, it's the person who, jumps in a professional community chat room or a forum, and all they're doing is, promoting their stuff, linking their stuff, selling their stuff, without ever just participating in the conversation as a person, as a peer. And it is incredible how little you need to do to cross the threshold where you can become a peer. And then when you have something to offer, people are excited. Like, the person who always shows up with good stuff has more good stuff from me. Fantastic. But people associate self-promotion with the worst, with the laziest end of the spectrum, again, as the whole spectrum. So I think if you are always putting the audience's best interest forward, and when you are offering a product, whether it's free or paid, when you've got something to give that asks people to click a link to your article or listen to your podcast or watch your video, let alone buy your software or your course or your book or whatever it is, if you haven't placed an investment, you can't make a withdrawal, right? And I think that's, if you have made those investments, and I can use the launch of this book as an example. I've done a lot of investing in a community. I've given away everything that I possibly can, and not because I feel like it means I deserve anything, but it's because I feel like if I'm not giving, if I'm not sharing, that's kind of selfish and uncool. So if I default to generosity, giving, teaching, sharing, as much as is scalable within the resources that I have, that buys me the opportunity to make an offer later. And the number of people that have bought this book in the last week whose names showed up or who emailed me that they were so excited for me and so excited to buy a book or buy multiple copies and give them as gifts that I haven't talked to in a decade. But at some point 10 years ago or 8 years ago, we had a conversation and they were like, yo, that was a good conversation. Like, I got something out of that, whether it's they learned something or they just felt that they felt connected with. Like 90+% of my work, and I think 90+% of the work in business is making people feel like that you at least tried to connect with them. And then and hopefully in enough cases you actually make that connection. The remaining 10%, 5%, whatever's left, that's where commerce gets done. But it gets done with people who already want to do the work with you. And that work is so much sweeter, let me tell you.
All right, so I want to transition this into like finance, money talk a little bit. So I noticed a little bit of the overlap that Ken and I, the notes that we took, was about this concept of money psychology that you brought up a couple times. So is that more tactical, like how to think about using money for your business, or is there kind of a touch of wellness in there too? Like what work will you take on versus how it will make you feel? Could you just like touch a little bit more on that?
That is such a good question and really, really well framed. I think applying a wellness lens to it is not the terminology I would have thought of, but I think it's actually better than anything that I was thinking. There is I think, well, again, the theme of the book, the subtitle of the book is, the long game of business. And I think implied, in order to live a long life, you need to be healthy. In order for a business to live a long life, it needs to be healthy. And so a wellness look at the money psychology is absolutely the right one. So, there's a couple of things, there's 2 lessons in here that come to mind that I think map well to the wellness lens. One is the way a lot of folks handle and respond to money decisions, or even think about money as an opportunity or a tool, I think ties back to, their own lived experience, which may include some form of trauma around money. A lot of people have really broken relationships with money, and not just when money is scarce. Right? When money is available, that means that you have a broken relationship with money, or can, I should say, have a broken relationship with money too. So I think maybe the lesson in here is to, and like one of the prompts in here is to ask yourself, why do you get paid? Like, let's say you've got a job you even like and make a good living, and that money comes in to your bank account twice a month if you're on salary. If you're an entrepreneur, whatever schedule you have set up for yourself. Let's say you're making a living that makes you happy. If I were to pose a challenge, hey, you've got to go make $5,000 in the next 7 days. Evaluate your, I don't want to say don't plan, but separate yourself from the making of the plan, but reflect on the emotional response to how it feels to be told you've got to go make $5,000. And whether that's a positive or a negative response or whatever that breaks down as, I think those are really good clues to how you make business decisions more broadly, how you view an opportunity or a deal. I think the American view on business is very particular. One of the benefits of running a co-working space in a world that is now, adopted co-working globally is I've gotten to never live in yet, but experience up close business cultures in other parts of the world. And the American cultures definitely permeated a lot of the world, for better and for worse. But if I were to sort of draw a spectrum from the sort of American variation where it's all about doing the deal to maybe the Japanese version where trust and this almost like this sort of cultural dance of how trust is built through exchanges. I mean, even starting with how a business card is seen and perceived in a culture, and how the exchange of a business card is done in Japan can define a business relationship for better or for worse. And it all comes down to the same fundamentals of trust, where trust is valued. In my own personal experience, I made the choice and worked very hard and have and earned privilege to make the decision that I don't work with people that I don't trust. Right? That is not an American point of view. It makes me a real outlier in a lot of business settings. People want to work with people they trust. They tend to prefer it. But I've made it sort of my default. The counter to that is the Japanese version, where if you have a business deal that's going really well and you introduce a business partner that maybe you haven't talked about yet at the wrong stage of the deal, you can throw the whole deal, and it doesn't matter how much money's on the table. The Japanese culture is, if you did that, I'm not sure how, like, where else I can't trust you. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's necessarily a better end of the spectrum, mind you. As the extremes tend to be problematic in both ways. I think a lot of like racism and xenophobia can be looked at the same way. You are different, therefore I don't trust you and I don't want to work with you. That's also bad. So there's a really like careful nuance to be walked here. But to bring this all back to that core money psychology, I think evaluating questions like that challenge, you got to make $5,000 in the next 7 days. How does that make you feel? Or that money shows up in your bank account when you get paid. Do you know why you get paid? It's not because your employer likes you. That may be a factor. Not being liked, you can also technically stay employed. But like, what do you do for the business that makes it worth it to the business objectively to pay you and to pay you that amount? And we kind of live in a culture and a society where it's really easy to be abstracted away from that. And if you plan to be successful in business, I don't think you can live abstracted from that for very, very long. So again, all of that is, I think, very much rooted in the way you think isn't right or wrong. It just might not be the healthiest way to think about it. But step one is kind of be bringing some awareness to whatever the way you think about money is, and acknowledging that that might not be the default for everybody. And even if it is a default for a lot of people, that it might not be the best thing for you or the long term of your business.
There's another thing I wanted to bring up. So page 4 of the book, you talk about passion, not necessarily being an input. Some people think, I don't want to say people because everyone is different, but some people think that starting a business, you have to be absolutely passionate about what you're starting. But talk more about passion being an output as opposed to an input.
Yeah, I think this one's really interesting through the lens of creative people who are my main audience. It's where I've spent I've spent more time interacting with creative people than I have with a corporate audience, for instance. Mm-hmm. And so there's a couple of different ways to look at this, and it's been kind of interesting to watch them be read through those two different perspectives, because this book is a little bit of a mirror or a Rorschach test. Depending on who you are and where you are, it shows up a little bit differently for you, and I think that's kind of cool. So I'll speak for the creative folks first. Creative people, often part of their creation process has generated some element of passion or joy in their life. And the things they've done for work or to earn an income maybe haven't. How many musicians work as servers or baristas to make enough money? They don't give a crap about the job. The job allows them to play music and make music because that's what they are passionate about. And I have so much respect for that lifestyle, and it is hard and it is work. All of it is work. However, I also think that people get confused about turning their passion into a business. And specifically, when turning, there's a lot of ways to do it, but I'll talk specifically about one, which is when they start turning the passion into a business and the business part doesn't work so well, right? That can potentially undermine the happiness. But the other side of it is it's the idea that if I'm going to own the business, why would the business that I own not be the thing that I'm already passionate about, right? And there's some wisdom out there that says, well, starting a business is hard, and the only way you're going to push through it is if you're passionate about it. So you got to go in with the thing you're passionate about it, because you'll do it long enough to actually, and like, yes, that is a path that leaves a lot of things up to luck and privilege and opportunity and things like that. A different way to look at it is, why are you passionate about that creative thing in the like? Why are you passionate about music? Well, part of it might be because you love just making it, but I'd be willing to bet that a part of it is because you put in the time to get good at it. You weren't good at it on day one. No one is a magical guitar player on, like, there are very few prodigies. There are way more people who maybe have some aptitude and then the support infrastructure and then the lapsing of time to get good. It's the reason you're passionate about it is because you took the time to practice and get good at it. And the feedback loop of practice, get good at it, practice, get good at it, practice, get good at it is the source of passion. I believe that firmly. The healthy version of passion, because you can also kill in passion. And that passion is not very good. So I think if people would, again, introspect on why are you passionate about the creative thing and realize that it is the practice growth feedback loop, you can create a business that you, in something you are not necessarily passionate about, but that you maybe at the very least have a desire to learn. If you are not passionate about it initially, that is okay and normal. And I think people give up in the first couple of weeks that they're not passionate about it. And that is throwing away opportunities, because in those first couple of weeks, the odds of you having enough of that practice growth feedback loop to feel passionate about something, very, very low. One of the books that I reference in the Tiny MBA is a book called Badass by Kathy Sierra, who created her and her partner created the Head First books for O'Reilly 20 years ago. Kathy was a sort of a secret mentor of mine early in my career. Later, I feel fortunate enough to have gotten to know her, and it's a rare experience of meeting a hero and them actually being as wonderful as you hoped they would be. Kathy's book Badass is one of the most important books I've ever read in my career. And if you don't buy my book, buy that one. If you buy both, that's better. But if you don't buy mine, buy Badass. And it is also a unique book, both in style and content and context. But she talks a lot about that growth arc. And it's, for her, it's the perspective of when you're a designer or a creator for your user, right? Your user's not passionate about using your software. Your user's not passionate about reading my book. It doesn't matter how good I am at pitching it, here on this show. I don't expect anyone to be passionate about this book until this book has them do a thing and then they get a result, right? Then maybe they're passionate about this book, if I'm lucky. Kathy talks about that from a sort of scientific, neuroscientific perspective, and the opportunities in business to find passion in something new and honestly, I think to stay in business for a long term, I've been in business for 15 years because every couple of months I've got something new that on the surface seems boring, but I practice it. I get good enough at it to say, it was actually kind of fun. And if you can get addicted to that process, I think you can, that is way more valuable than wanting to go into things that you are if you're filtering only for things you are already passionate about, you're leaving so much good opportunity, not just a business opportunity for sure, but also opportunity for yourself on the table.
So a lot of the red thread I'm hearing is personal reflection and also reflection about your business. I know there was a line in there that was like, take your business back quarterly, figure out what's not working, but also figure out what's not all the way working, and maybe there are pieces that are working. So you do that like on a somewhat regular basis, and I'm just interested in hearing like what does that process look like for you? Is it a spreadsheet? Is it just a shower thought? I just want to hear what that personal process is.
Yeah, I think mine's a little more on the shower thought end of the spectrum. I'm not a live by the spreadsheet metrics kind of guy. I was in a really great talk last night with Erica Hall, who is a design researcher who wrote a book called Just Enough Research. That's really, really wonderful. And she was talking a lot about sort of the difference between quantitative data and qualitative data. And I definitely have a bias in favor of qualitative data. So my process is definitely more experiential. It's not so much a reactive thing as you're saying. It's more of a, how did that go? What's a thing I would do better? I think like my default mode for, and I'll do it when I get off this call, is, that was a lot of fun. I enjoyed talking to those folks. What can I do better for the next one? What would I want to change? And if I'm smart, I'll write it down. But at the very least, like giving myself that moment of pause and reflection, even when something went really well, and this has been a blast, by the way, even when something goes really well, to say, cool, well, what's the one thing I'd want to tune or tweak just a little bit better next time? And is there anything I can do to set future me up for a win? I think that's a big part of my sort of guiding philosophy is if I'm doing something now, I want future me to look back and be like, thanks, buddy. And like cultivating that habit takes, as a habit, takes a long time. But it can also be like deeply creative, which means it's not like, I wish we had like, 50% more people tuning in. Like, I don't really care about that. I care about, did it reach the people that I wanted it to reach? Did they get something out of it? Is there something that I learned that I want to practice more, that sort of thing? I think that's a good, healthy way to walk away from a lot of things, rather than, and how many times you walk away from a conversation, you're like, stupid, all the things I should have said. Like, I try really hard to not do that to and it's hard to not do that to yourself, but I try and like take that like silly little monster in my brain that wants to do that and give him a different job, which is, if you're going to be a pain in my butt, find a thing that we can actually make a little better, and we'll do that next time, okay? That's the relationship with the little monster in my brain. And now you all think I'm completely crazy.
No, it's about right. Everyone has an inner critic, and it's always something you want to try to redirect. Yeah. Hey, speaking of that, I have one more topic I want to bring up. But before I do, just for anyone who's, and I hope everyone wants to go out and get the book. I really enjoyed it. It's a Tiny.MBA, and you're in your opening phase here, so there's a 33% off discount. But I thought one of the interesting things you have in the book on page 72 is extreme excitement, aka irrational exuberance, is an unreliable emotional state to make business decisions. And if I pull back from that, a lot of what you're saying, I think, to people is find a way to make emotions, value them, respect that they're there, but don't let emotions run away with things like money decisions and business decisions and partner decisions and what you want your, money to be and things like that. So just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, no, I think you are right in that as a theme across a lot of things. And here's the other thing is like, we've, in a lot of ways, in a lot of different ways, no matter whether you are self-employed or you work for somebody else, we've normalized like busyness, whether it's appearing busy or making busy or anywhere or whatever it is. Like, we've normalized it, or in the worst cases, we've kind of fetishized it, hustle culture and all, like, super not into it. And that is not to say you should not or will not have to work hard. You absolutely will. Nor does it mean you should love your work so much that you do it all the time and don't take any breaks. Like, that's no good either. everything in moderation, including moderation, is something that I is a quote that I love to go by. But I think at the heart of it, if I can have one impact on the business world, is to remind folks that the work is a means to an end, right? That there's other factors that I think are or more importantly must be in play in order for things to really be enduring, for them to be sustainable. And that does not preclude things from growth or even high growth. I'm not opposed to growth. Growth is not a bad thing. But if growth is not sustainable, right? The only real thing in this world that grows for the sake of growing, and technically there's two things. One of them is a virus. Haha. That's not really growth, that's replication. But cancer, right? Same thing. Like the things that grow for growth's sake, we see what damage they do. Versus things that grow in response to the things that we want to see more of happen. If the only thing we optimize for is money, the only thing we will get is more money. And at what cost, right? So more money is not a bad thing. Money's great. Money creates all kinds of opportunities in and of itself. But if it's at other costs, that's where I think things, that's how we get into the mess that we've been in, right? So yeah, I mean, I want folks to sort of look at themselves more holistically, look at the system that you participate in more holistically, and realize that, you can succeed without being a net negative. I think there's a lot of feeling that business has created a lot of the net negatives that we're seeing in the world. And that's true. But I think that's because we've seen an optimization towards a set of defaults that we just kind of lost the plot somewhere. And if we can bring the plot back to creating, one of my favorite analogies is you have to put on your oxygen mask so that you can help other people. That thing we've heard a million times on an airplane, although maybe not in the last few months. It's not they say it, put on your oxygen mask before you help other people, but I always kind of intentionally reframe it as so you can help other people. You putting on your oxygen mask means that you can continue helping more people. You can, and if the outcome of that is, in that case, more lives are saved, or in this case, your business makes more money, that's a phenomenal outcome. But if we build a good business infrastructure, then we should be able to optimize for better human outcomes, better cultural outcomes, better societal outcomes, and still make more money as a byproduct. And I hope that folks who read this realize that you can create a business without being a terrible person, without extracting things from the world. And if you do, I'll say thank you in advance.
So hold that book in front of your face for a second.
Yep.
Alex Hillman has written The Tiny MBA. It's a great book. What about 130 pages? What's the number?
It's about 130 pages. If you read it cover to cover, you can read it in about 30 minutes. Although, as most people have noted, there's at least a few pages that'll make you stop and think and want to write something in the liner. So hopefully it takes you a little bit longer. But yeah, it's a short read. Hopefully you can, if you enjoy reading it, it brings up one or two things for you. Set a calendar reminder, do it again in 3 or 6 months, or at the end of the year, whatever it is. This is one that I hope that if it's good for you once, going back to it again and again will always stir up something new.
Alex is the creator of the Indy Hall co-working space, and he's also one of the two founders of stackingthebricks.com. And we've had a pleasure talking to you today.
Absolutely.
Likewise. Thank you for awesome questions. Thank you for sharing your audience and your audience's time today. And stay safe with whatever's left of this storm coming through.
Yeah, I'm getting 60-mile-an-hour winds on my window. That's why I'm looking to the left. Take care, Alex. Take care.
Cool, gang. Thank you.
Alex, thank you.